The American Civil War. A brutal conflict that shaped the soul of a nation. This is the story of how the United States of America tore itself apart, and what it took to stitch itself back together. It is a war still misunderstood, still debated, and still alive in the conscience of a country it nearly destroyed. This war was not inevitable, but it was years in the making. It was not simply North against South. It was economy against economy, future against past, and freedom against bondage. Slavery had become the spine of the Southern economy. It was embedded in every law, every institution. Millions of black men, women, and children were considered property. They had no rights, no voice, no protection. Meanwhile, the North was changing rapidly. Factories were rising. Immigrants were pouring in. Cities were growing. There were still racists in the North. But the North did not depend on slavery to survive. And more people were calling for its end. Laws tried to calm the storm. The Missouri Compromise admitted Missouri as a slave state and Maine as free. The Compromise of 1850 included the Fugitive Slave Act, angering many in the North. The Kansas-Nebraska Act opened new lands to slavery by popular vote. Bleeding Kansas erupted in violence. It became clear compromise was failing. In 1857, the Dred Scott decision declared that no black person could ever be a citizen. That decision struck like thunder. It confirmed to millions that the system was deeply corrupted. Then came John Brown, an abolitionist who believed slavery would only end through bloodshed. In 1859, he led a raid on a federal armory at Harper's Ferry. He wanted to spark a slave revolt. He failed and was executed. But in death he became a symbol, a martyr to abolitionists, a terrorist to the South. The election of 1860 was the final fracture. Abraham Lincoln won the presidency without carrying a single Southern state. The South panicked. They believed Lincoln would abolish slavery outright. South Carolina was the first to leave the Union. 10 more states followed. In early 1861, they formed the Confederate States of America. They elected Jefferson Davis as their president, and they began seizing federal property within their borders. Then came Fort Sumter, a Union fort in the harbor of Charleston, South Carolina. Confederate forces surrounded it and demanded surrender. When the Union refused, they opened fire. The American Civil War had begun. Many believed the war would last weeks. Instead, it lasted 4 years. It became a grinding, bitter, and costly struggle. At the First Battle of Bull Run, Union troops panicked and fled. It was a wake-up call. The South would not be easily defeated. At Antietam, over 23,000 men were killed, wounded, or missing in a single day. It remains the bloodiest day in American history. The dead lay in rows, unburied, untouched. The scale of death was staggering. Gettysburg saw 3 days of fighting and over 50,000 casualties. It marked the high water mark of the Confederacy. After Gettysburg, the South would never again launch a major offensive in the North. In the West, Union forces captured New Orleans and took control of the Mississippi River. General Ulysses S. Grant laid siege to Vicksburg and starved the city into surrender. This cut the Confederacy in half. General William Tecumseh Sherman then began his march to the sea. He destroyed railroads, burned crops, and tore through Georgia. He practiced total war, aiming to break the South's ability and will to fight. Meanwhile, President Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation. It declared that all enslaved people in Confederate states were free. It did not immediately end slavery, but it changed the purpose of the war. Now the Union fought not only for survival, but for freedom. Black men rushed to enlist. Over 180,000 served in the Union Army. They fought with courage. They faced death not only from bullets, but from execution or re-enslavement if captured. Yet they fought. For their people. For dignity. For the future. The Confederacy hoped for help from Europe. They believed cotton would bring them allies. But after the Emancipation Proclamation, Britain and France stepped back. They would not support a war for slavery. The war continued to drag on. The South's resources dried up. Its men were exhausted. Grant pushed forward with relentless pressure. He understood that victory would come not just through strategy, but through attrition. In 1865, Union forces captured Richmond, the Confederate capital. Robert E. Lee tried to escape west, but his army was surrounded. On April 9, 1865, at Appomattox Courthouse, he surrendered to Grant. Just 5 days later, Abraham Lincoln was assassinated, shot in the back of the head at Ford's Theater. He did not live to see the peace he had fought for. The South lay in ruins. Cities were burned. Fields left fallow. Millions of people were dead, wounded, orphaned, or traumatized. Slavery was abolished by the 13th Amendment. But freedom did not bring equality. Racism remained deeply rooted. Reconstruction began, but it was slow, violent, and fiercely resisted. 1 in every 4 Southern white men of military age had died. Entire communities were wiped out. Tens of thousands of men returned home with missing limbs. Many were never whole again, in body or mind. And the country remained deeply divided. The American Civil War ended on paper, but its consequences are still unfolding. This war forced America to reckon with its original sin. It tore off the mask. It exposed every contradiction. And it demanded that the country choose what it truly believed in. The cost was staggering. But the future was bought with that price. Not all battles are fought with guns, and not all wounds are visible. This was the war that forged modern America, and the memory of it must never fade. Please like, share, and subscribe if you believe in telling the truth behind history. This is the American Civil War, and this is the story that must be remembered.